we've been talking so much about the potential for National Guard troops or federal law enforcement to enter Chicago has been the next city that President Trump has highlighted here. Of course, they're on the streets of Washington, D.C. He's suggested other cities like New York might get that treatment next. All of this, of course, began in Los Angeles a couple of months ago.
And at the time, even when he was threatening Los Angeles, no one really took it that seriously. This was an unthinkable move in terms of troops, in terms of actually the legalities around it. And now we find out, well, it's actually not legal to do that.
Well, we did get a court ruling that's going to raise some real questions about going into other cities. The president has a lot of leeway here in Washington, D.C., in the federal city. It's not like that when you go into another state with an executive that actually is the commander-in-chief of the National Guard. So here we are, the judge ruling here that the president's deployment in L.A., this was in June, against the immigration crackdown, violated federal law, with much to wonder about the way forward. We assemble our political panel. Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are both with us, Bloomberg Politics contributors here on the Tuesday edition. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stone Court Capital. Jeanne, democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center and Bloomberg Politics contributor. You know, one thing, Jeanne, that Donald Trump has always said since he got back in the White House is that he will comply with court orders. Could this slow down the role of National Guard troops, if not federal law enforcement in other parts of the country?
You know, it absolutely could, but I'll tell you, I am doubtful that it is going to slow down this administration, and I'll tell you why. Very much like his imposition of the tariffs, which is something he has talked about almost his entire adult life. He has been fixated on violence in Chicago for much of his life. He built the Trump Tower there. He has talked about it since before he ran for election the first time, continued right through to the current moment, I think as early as today, if I'm reading my Truth Social right. So I'm not sure this is going to slow him down. The other thing is that we also have a Supreme Court decision just earlier, a few months ago, in which they said they won't allow federal district court judges to impose nationwide injunctions, which raises the question, is Judge Breyer's ruling just for his district, or does it apply nationwide? So as much as I would like to think this may slow things down so we could get a real decision out of the Supreme Court, I'm not sure it's going to slow down this administration.
Rick, weigh in here. Do you agree with Jeanne on that point? Does this serve as some sort of deterrent when it comes to other cities across the United States? Or at the end of the day, could this simply be just something that happens months after the actual action of putting troops in those cities? How do you view it?
Yeah, Critty, I think this is exactly what Trump is looking for. He wants to test the legal boundaries of a very powerful presidency, and he's done it in various ways, and this is just one of the most current ways that he has said, sue me. I'm going to deploy these troops. I'm going to stake out an emergency. I'm going to take the powers that the Constitution gives me and exert them. It would not surprise, and then, by the way, take me to the Supreme Court, where he's running a pretty good track record right now. And so I have no doubts that there are voices inside the White House saying, great, this is exactly what we planned. You know, we want to take this all the way to the Supreme Court. If we are given the authority by the Supreme Court to deploy National Guard troops anywhere we want, for basically any reason we want, this is what they're looking for. They want that carte blanche, and they want it within the first year of their presidency. So I think we see this playing out exactly the way they wanted it.
Well, Donald Trump on Truth Social, to your point, Jeanne, today, this is just a couple of hours ago, at least 54 people, he writes, were shot in Chicago over the weekend. 8 people were killed. The last 2 weekends were similar. The president writes, Chicago is the worst and most dangerous city in the world. And I'm looking at a list of cities by homicide rate. The first American city that appears on the list is, in fact, New Orleans, and that's at position 28. It is followed by Memphis and a few others here. Before you get that far down the list, Jeanne, it's pretty much all in Mexico or in Central America. The president doesn't actually think Chicago is the most dangerous city in the world, I presume, right?
Not if he is looking at the data, but as we know, he is not fond of looking at data. He is fond of finding data or creating his own reality and talking about it. And he very much believes that Chicago is violent. And we should not underestimate the fact that 54 shootings over a weekend of Labor Day is stunning. It is violent. It needs to be addressed. The problem here is, as this federal judge said, the president doesn't have the power under the Comitatus Act to do this. It is an overreach of his power. He does not have the ability to set up a nationwide police force as it is under his power. And so that is the problem for Donald Trump, which is why I think last week in that long extended cabinet meeting that you sat through, Joe, he said, I want to be invited in. And of course, he's not going to be invited in either by Mayor Johnson or by the governor. But it is very much in keeping, to Rick's point, with what the Republican administration here has been really wanting to do, not just to address crime, which they think is a winning issue for them, but immigration as well.